katoa, welcome everybody. Just some housekeeping notes. An evacuation of the building is required. You will hear an evacuation siren. Please exit the building via the front or back stairwells. The evacuation point is in front of St John's Church property to the east of the council building over there. If there is an ICC team member in attendance, follow their directions. Otherwise, fastest wins. If needed, a first aid kit and list of first aiders is located on this floor outside the door to the council chamber. A defibrillator is located on the front right wall of the council chamber. Instructions for the use of this are on the container. Please don't ever require the use of it. Thanks. The toilet facilities on exiting the council chamber are men's first on your left and women's second. Something wrong with that too, isn't there? If you have any questions, find an ICC team member when you have a moment. Thanks very much. Right, apologies. We have an apology from Councillor Cook. I think that's all. Welcome those of you in the ether. Can you hear us all right, Jane and Paula? Thank you.
Do you want to move for the apologies? I'll move.
Yes, thank you.
I'll second that. Thank you.
Stephen Horrell and Mr. Robertson. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against. Carried. Thank you. Sorry, just trying to change my screen so I can see the others as well. Thank you. Right. Any declarations of interest? No, thank you. Number 4, public forum petitions and deputations. I haven't been advised of any. Confirmation of minutes of the 11th of August.
I can move that.
Somebody like to move those? Thanks, Councillor McCallum and Councillor McPhail. Just before we move those, I would like to give you an update of the actions from those minutes. I've got that round the right way. Item 1 was to change the change to the ACC standards, and Chris is discussing this item with Tania, but Tania's been on leave. Item 2, there was a cyber security question. Security awareness training will be carried out over due to an ongoing piece of work, which is being developed through IT shared services. It hasn't dropped off the radar, it's still in progress. Item 4, there was a economic recovery project. BOFA will be submitting a written report and a glossary of terms will then be put together. And from item 6, the risk management workshop is on the list. Jan's trying to find a space to accommodate her. Thanks for that. Any other matters from the minutes?
Madam Chair, just following on item 2, annual vehicle report. While we got an annual vehicle report, there was some follow-up to that, and we thought, I think, if my understanding was correct, we were going to go back and just look at 1 or 2 parts of that policy, just to see how we implemented it. So I think maybe we should have that before the next annual report comes in. So it's just really an update on that discussion and tease out a little bit further some of the discussion that was there. And that probably needs to happen sooner in the year rather than later in the year.
Yep.
That'd be my recommendation.
I'm sure that will fit in as part of something else. Yep. Thank you. And Chairman Horrell?
Yep. Minor correction, the top of page 12 where it says governance is currently in discussions. I think it should be management. Minor detail, but
Yes. Thank you. Make that change. Right, with those amendments and comments, I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against. Carried. Thank you. Just before we move on, I'll just ask for some comment on whether you are finding the action follow-ups from the minutes useful.
I think they are, Madam Chair, but I just wonder, it's been a little bit pedantic. Maybe we move the minutes and then follow up
sure.
the actions. Maybe better because you approve it, then you're saying what's the follow up.
And look, would I just again being pedantic, would it be possible to see it scheduled actually in the minutes?
Sure.
I think it would be useful. I mean, I'm glad that you're keen to keep us to the action points. I think it would be wise to have them in the minutes as well.
Yeah,
if that's okay.
perfect. Suits me. We were just treading carefully as we went. So
No, I appreciate that.
Yep,
Oh, it's a
great.
great move, Linda.
thank you, radio. We'll move on to item 2. Sorry. Questions? Oh. Notification of extraordinary or urgent business. I've had none. I've had no questions, and I don't have a chairman's report per se. So, do we have any councillors' reports? Thank you.
We do have a supplementary to.
Oh,
on
true.
Item 6.
Oh, that's not for our
No,
paper,
it's
though.
It's not, okay,
Yeah.
next meeting, okay.
Yeah, so that's
Right.
regional services.
Sorry.
Councillor McPhail can deal with that.
Just testing, yeah.
Thanks, good. We're all awake. Fabulous.
It's like being on the plane to Kaikoui rather than Invercargill.
Yeah.
I almost
Right.
done that.
And item 9.1, then we move to item 1, which is procurement and contract management report, please. Sorry,
I'll talk to that, Madam Chair.
thank you.
I'll take obviously the report as read. Just 3 points I'd like to bring just to the council's attention. The first one is that there's an ongoing program of work to upskill people throughout ES on good contract and procurement practices. That's an ongoing program, and as schools are improving. There's on bottom of page 11, there's a schedule of timelines that we've undertaken to meet. We are going to struggle to meet some of those, partly because of COVID, partly because simply of resourcing. In particular, it says there that the financial delegations before the end of September, they will be completed for the end of September, but they won't come to council for approval probably until October, as an update of that. The reason for that, for the delay in that, is that the update was prepared, but then it was brought to my attention that there may be an impact on staff grading. But so some of those timelines are pretty tight. We're endeavoring to do our best to meet those that we can. The only other point I want to bring to councillors' attention is around jobs for nature and shovel-ready programs. The government has expressed, and this is on page 12, called Under Next Steps. The government expressed an interest in undertaking an audit of procurement processes around the shovel-ready program. So I'll just bring that to your attention that we expect that will happen at some stage. I don't know what form that audit will take, what form that review will take, but it is something that we are aware of and may arise. No other comments from me on the procurement plan, Madam Chair, but we can take questions.
Thank you. Bruce, you have a question?
Yeah, look, I do, and thank you for the paper. Chris, I think the thing, and you touched on it, was actually that the delegation suddenly plagued with the job gradings. I just wondered if you could expand that. I wondered why delegations did play with job grading.
Well, it's, yeah, I wasn't aware of it, Bruce. I redrafted the financial delegations, taking out names and roles because they change, and referring primarily to tiers within the organisation because they're more stable and more resilient. We have raised within those tier matrix. I've raised some of the financial delegations to sort of streamline work process so they weren't having everything signed off. And I was ready to bring it to council for ratification or through exec to council. But then I was told that part of the job grading process of the various tiers and roles is the financial delegation within that job description. So Joe Simon is looking at that for me. So I had to pull it and wait until the impact to make sure that we understood exactly what the outcome might be. So I'm waiting to hear back on what that might mean.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Look, and can I just note, I previously expressed an interest. I had indicated I have been reviewing jobs for nature in the past, and I have more than completed my report. Perhaps offline, it would be useful for me to at least, I think I can now, share with probably you, Nicola and Rob, the outcome of that. I'm interested that they're doing another audit. Okay,
right.
Given not because that's a problem with my original piece of work, but obviously I did do quite a piece of work, and I did interview Ali and Environment Southland. So it would be useful for me to probably just share what I know so that we are prepared for that.
And with your permission, I'd like to be a part of that conversation.
Yeah, well, Chris, with you, whoever it needs to be, I'd be happy to share some of my comments that I made to the reference group on that, which would be helpful.
Thanks very much, Bruce. Any other questions? Councillor McCallum or me?
That was very interesting. I look forward to the outcome of
Yeah.
that. I just, at bottom of page 11, Chris, I just want to understand two things there really. Developing a contract register, depending on what you've got, I'd hate that we're limiting ourselves to only a number when through a procurement process, we might have to look wider than where we have normally looked. So I just want to make sure it's as open-ended as we can, because depending on the job or the procurement we're looking at, while you might have preferred suppliers, there is always changes in the supplying regimes.
Indeed.
And we need to make sure that's open. So is that, am I assessing that that is an open-ended register?
No, just to clarify that point, the contracts register is a register of the contract we have throughout Environment Southland. We don't have overview or oversight of all our contracts in a single place.
Okay.
So that's what that's about. It's not to sort of limit on a scope of who might contract with. That's what that's about.
Okay, I understand that. So the next part is the next line down. It says it talks about a standardized contract template. I presume in there that's a bit like the order book system. Everything is written down, so it's very easy for the next person to pick it up, follow on, and know exactly what all the terms and conditions are for the contract, and it's transparent and it's not sitting in somebody's laptop. It's actually formally there for all parts of the organisation to look at.
Yes, the standard contract template is to assist the staff. There are different, obviously, contract environments. We have a number of standard templates already through, I forget the name of the publishing house that we use. My view is that probably needs to be revisited. And there are some guidelines around those contract templates that, depending on the nature of the contract, the person with the ES can pick up a template that best fits. I want to have discussions with Paula around all of the government and the use of those contracts, but that's a further discussion we need to have.
Can I suggest, Madam Chair, that we try and standardise that form as much as possible through the organisation? The reason I say that is when people know where things are on the form, they can actually populate the next part of the process a lot easier than having half a dozen templates and you've got to find stuff and they don't relate. So it just helps the process a lot better.
With permission, Madam Chair, Paul, do you want to make any comment about what we've just been talking about?
I'm quite happy to comment with regards to that. So the templates that we do use, or the suite of templates that we use, is with Terrace Publications. I think what we need to understand with regards to the different types of templates that we have is that every contract or every agreement that we enter into actually has to be reviewed with every different option around the legal side of things. These templates provide those options. What we're finding is for our end users or for the team within the organisation is that we probably have too many templates and too many options. So what we have to actually do is just review and actually reduce them down so it's actually more user friendly. I think through the procurement process and the new procurement manual and policy that we've implemented, Ali has actually done a lot of procurement work, and she works with Terrace Publications quite frequently, and she's finding it very good to use. She actually ran some good refresher training over lockdown for our end users. And I think it's really clarified to the rest of the organisation that they're very usable. It's just you actually have to take the time to read and actually understand what you're reading.
Thanks, Paula. I've got me and then Chairman Horrell. Just follows on from Councillor McCallum's point about standardising things, and I'm interested in your comment, Chris, about not having a kind of central oversight of all the many contracts that we have across the organisation. So I'm wondering if it's worth us looking at how that might be more possible, whether that's a part-time role or whether there's I don't know, but something, is there more value in us having a central oversight to reduce the risk, I suppose, of all those little contracts all across?
Good question, Madam Chair. I'm in discussion with Rob around procurement resource. At the moment, it sits with Paula's team. She's not specifically resourced for that. My view is that we need to examine ways of bringing the procurement function in as a central role. arguing within finance, reporting as part of the corporate function. And the role is around procurement, and I'm putting forward as procurement and contracts as part of that overall role. And I would see them bringing together, enhancing the processing and procurement practices, pulling together a contracts register so that we have oversight of all the contracts and our exposure there with that. So that's something that we're in discussion with it at the moment to resource that.
So do you think we need a paper to come back to us on that?
Chair, I think it's we can report back on where we get with it, but I'm not sure we need a paper
Right.
as such. I think I'd rather, spend the time getting our thinking clear, and then we can
If we can hear back from that. That'd be good. Thank you. Chairman Horrell?
Yes, just an aside on that previous conversation, when we advertised the shovel-ready projects, was a number of contractors who came in and said, look, we want to be sure that it's not just the standard ones that we get an option. I'm just wondering, do we have something on the website? Because obviously you'd have to have, there'll be a whole list of things you would have to health and safety plans and things to be able to apply. Is that easy to find? Because I know we had a number of people saying all this extra work's out there, and we'd like to put our hand up. So is it easy to find that a contract's coming up? Is it easy to actually register as a approved contractor?
Chair, when we have for anyone else to answer this,
Yeah.
When we go out for tender, we will have a process. That information will be on the website, but we do it on a specific tender process. Paul, I see you there, so you can come and try that after. So it's a specific. We don't have a registration thing as that I'm aware of at the moment, but it's per contract as we come up. And noting this is a 3-year program of work, so we just want to. It needs to be faced in the right way.
Paul, did you have anything to sweep up with?
Maybe I can just clarify a couple of matters for you there. With regards to the contracts register, no, we don't have one organisational contracts register. Within divisional teams, they do have a contracts register. So they're siloed. What we're trying to do is actually pull them together. So we do have an overview, but it's within different teams. With regards to our tender process, we use GETS, so the Government Electronic Tender platform, for actually distributing our tenders that are available, and that's what we're using currently. So it used to be in paper form where people had to actually send their paper documents in and we'd have a tender box. We've now gone to an electronic system, which is much better, much faster. And with regards to the contracts themselves and the contracts register, although we do not have an organisational contracts register currently, we do store every contract in our document management system. So every contractor has their own file and all their documentation is actually stored and safely secure within our document management system. So if we really did need to do a report very quickly, we could pull that from the document management system.
Thank you. Bruce?
I'm very interested in your point, Nicole, and I just want to reflect, because I wondered how much, while we have a procurement policy and manual, the critical question is actually what's our strategy? And I suspect when we get into PX and we start talking about risks, state of the contract market becomes really important. So the question ultimately is, GETS is certainly important, and it's the smart way to get our stuff, people know it. But if we're worried about actually all the right people having a chance and understanding and keeping or building a market, we have to think, what's our approach developing the market in Southland? By the way, in Chicago City, we were sitting, has the same challenge, and so does Southland District. So the question becomes, is there anything that we can do that is proactive that encourages the market to understand what's coming up? GETS is a really good mailbox. And I think that's probably what we're starting to see here with your example. But the critical question is, if we're concerned about the market being unaware, we have to be proactive in thinking through, how do we let the market know? How do we develop the market? We know what's coming up. So, in some of the places that I guess I work with, there probably are contractor meetings where they're saying, look, over the next year, this is our planned work program. And this is the probable timing we will be. Now, you may be doing that. Sorry, I could be speaking out of turn. But what I'm wanting to reflect here is that this is the structure. of how to be a good procurer and contract manager, we have to think about what is the state of the market and actually is that serving our needs. So the strategy of actually how we go about encouraging a good viable market in Southland is really important, but I also put the hook in, and it's relevant in Invercargill, and dare I say Gore as well, and Southland as well. There might be something there that would make that worthwhile, trying to make certain that we've got lined up. Because there will become a point where we are increasingly competing with each other for a scarce contractor market.
Thanks, Bruce. Really relevant. Rob?
Chair, would you mind if we ask Raymond if he wanted to add anything to the conversation, as he's the one who's got his hand on the wheel, as it were.
Nothing like walking into the room and
Hospital pass.
No pressure, Raymond, but
welcome, Raymond, and I'll just take a moment to welcome Councillor Beard. Just give me a wave if you need anything. Thanks, Raymond.
so as you know, Raymond heads up our catchment team that's running the climate resilience project.
Morning, Chair, morning, councillors. It is a very timely conversation to walk into the middle of, and there is a need, particularly with those climate resilience projects, for us to have some more engagement than we are at the moment with the sector in terms of signalling the workload that's coming along. And it is on my to-do list to certainly at least talk to the Contractors Federation and give them a bit of a heads up as to the workload that's attached to climate resilience. So absolutely very timely comments and something that I'm certainly quite mindful of.
And Chair, I think sort of picking up on Bruce's comments too, just around the value in us having ICC and GDC and SDC having a joined up conversation around the market. And so we'll take that one on board. Thank you.
Thanks, Raymond. Well done. Councillor McPhail?
Just to add to that, I'd be lying if I haven't had phone calls from contractors making sure that it's very open, transparent. They're questioning what does local mean in regards to they're looking even within districts. Obviously, there's Invercargill local to Gore. All these things about where this money's going to be flowing. It's hugely important to the economy. So just making sure everyone knows and has the ability to contribute if they can.
Yeah. Chairman Horrell.
You're just following up on what Rob's got a comment that if the TAs are part of the conversation and you're looking at what's coming forward, it might be quite efficient with their needs for gravel, those sorts of things. Contracts are coming up. That linked up conversation just might make things quite a bit more efficient. And at times we're going to take something else, but nobody needs it, but they may have if they know it. And, rather than cart stuff for miles. So
COVID vaccines, if you're not using yours, we'll use it. So as an action or an outcome from this conversation, what would you like? Apart from expressing a desire to work.
I'm hearing the
conscious,
conversation.
I'm conscious, Chair, that we report on the shovel-ready projects on a regular basis. So I suggest that part of that next report we can talk about how this is developed. Is my suggestion, but always.
I'm just wondering. I understand that, Madam Chair, into the CE, but I'm just wondering whether it's a little bit more than that. I think there's an underlying thing. How do I, as a contractor sitting in the rural Southland, know what's coming up from any of my regulatory bodies? So we just get an understanding. Do we phone them? Do we send an email out? What is it that actually says, look, this is work coming up, and there's a program of work over the next X number of years, specifically around shovel ready, but we've got other stuff, annual drain cleaning and annual stuff, or biannual and 3-year cycles. We just need to get an understanding that we are actually looking at the pool of resources out there. And there were, I think, picking up on Councillor McPhail's point, the contractor interests in the region are basically saying, I just want the opportunity to participate. The outcome of that is after the process has gone in, and whether I can or can't, that's the process. But I just want the opportunity to have the ability to see what's coming up and decide whether I want to be part of it or not as a contractor. So I think it's reasonably quite high level. It doesn't have to be a big paper. It's just to get an understanding of that process.
So maybe we need a snapshot of the current situation.
Also add, I guess, that noting that we need contractors who've got the skill sets, the capacity, the standard that can do the work. So it's not open slava, I guess. And so, you know, we've got to make sure, because actually we will be judged on, is the work being done? Has it been done on time, to standard, to quality? You know, all of those, and is it going to stand up in a big flood type of thing? You know, so it's not there's a bit of.
I think that comes into the procurement process because you're actually asking those standards, which is a little bit separate. I understand what you're saying, and you're quite correct. That's part of the process. Can you meet these standards and what guarantees, et cetera, et cetera? There's another one that says, how do I know that I can be considered and I will meet these standards if I'm accepted, or I can't meet these standards, I'm actually out of the game.
So look, we can come. We could come back as part of that shovel ready report, possibly, or separate, depending on what you know. But I just, you know, we go through the normal tendering process where it gets advertised. We don't, you know, and sometimes we might go to who are the 3 or 4 we know that can do it. So, is there anything that perhaps Raymond would like to add to that conversation around? So, look, I don't want to. We don't need to complicate it.
No.
So we can come back around this.
Yeah, I'm tending to think it's a slightly wider conversation than just the
Shovel ready.
shovel ready. So I'm just looking for a way to not add a whole lot of more work, but for us to have an understanding of the current state and how it might.
I'm not sure, Chair, if this helps the discussion or not, but I did in the report to Regional Services Committee, I did talk about, I guess, a few of the challenges we've had with COVID lockdown and the COVID environment and health and safety plans. And that's not necessarily a criticism of the contractors that work for us, but most of them are fairly small, kind of one-man person band operations. And as CE says, they're good at what they do, and they've certainly been working for us for a long period of time. And it is all about, you know, quality of delivery, timeliness, and obviously cost-effective delivery as well. That isn't to say that we don't have an open mind for other players. And in fact, you know, my short time with ES, I've certainly had inquiries from a number of contractors who are interested in working for us. Always have an open door to looking at new contractors and trying to provide some opportunities for them to demonstrate their expertise. But I guess contractors can tend to come and go. And I think having a core of contractors that understand their business and understand you know, drainage, river networks, and that understand my staff and my team, there's also a lot of value in doing that. So, and I kind of, I guess, similar dynamics, if you like, to the Manawatu environment that I've come from. And ES operates in a very similar way to that. And is there a need to put a little bit more rigor around that? Yeah, there is. And that's on my to-do list. But to some degree, the system as it currently works, I think works pretty well.
Perhaps
Thanks,
add
Chris.
some
Yep.
help here. I actually think there's 2 ways in which I see this. One is Chris has given us a really good paper about actually the development of the procurement practices. That's the whole process. And I'm talking here, when I talk strategy, it's the same as what you said and what you said, Jeremy. It was actually the strategy, the whole program, how we do it. And Chris, you've mentioned, are we developing a more formalised procurement process, PMO, whatever we want to call it. That does also dovetail into ones like Jobs for Nature and shovel ready money. So there is actually a follow-up to this. I think it's really what I'm trying to get to. There's also possibly, and I'm trying to remember all the various risks I've looked at, there's probably a risk issue for us to discuss, for which this would be the solution as well. So I think my point is that actually I would think, and I'm just checking that it's within the ambit of OPAC and not regional service somewhere else. I think from a perspective of this, there is perhaps a need of a combination of understanding what is the strategy. Perhaps also the point of a decision being made around PMO, and then this coming back so we can have an understanding about the further direction of travel. This is about the widgets in the bill. Really good, really important, and so important, particularly to the fairness for all contractors. But we want to know actually the broader procurement strategy, and that follows on from this page. So at an appropriate point, it comes back under us, I would say, to us.
Makes sense. Everybody? clear that we've got some outcome coming from that.
Good.
Thanks, Raymond, very much, twice. So that brings the discussion to a conclusion. If somebody would like to move that.
I'm happy to move that.
The report, thanks, Councillor McCallum, seconded, Councillor McPhail, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Thank you. Item 2, Health, Safety and Wellbeing Management System Report. Paul and Amy, welcome. Thank you. Nice work.
Great. Good morning, everyone, and happy everyone's enjoying the lovely sunny weather out there today. Yeah, just take the report as read. There's a couple of things that I'd just like to cover. In fact, it's 3 items I'd just like to cover in the report. One is under the general operations. So as we all aware of, we've moved into this known space of COVID once again. So on the 17th of August, we went into a full lockdown. The difference being with this lockdown was that we are now dealing with the Delta variant, which in itself has posed some different changes of the way we do business and the way we work as such. And I really just like to just highlight the good work that was done by the Environment Southland IMT, or Incident Management Team, that stood up pretty quickly. In fact, we stood up within 45 minutes of getting the announcement, and we managed to get most people set up by 12 o'clock that night to be working from home, which was an achievement in itself. But yeah, so from that, we then moved into that space of level 4 of working from home and getting our teams all set up. And as an organization, I think we responded pretty well. We managed to get up and running pretty quickly, other than a few little minor glitches that we had to walk through. We managed to get everyone up and running and get ourselves back into that business as usual space within a couple of days. Unlike the last lockdown, of course, we're dealing with these level changes and the length of it. So we're still working in that space at the moment, and we know we put quite a few controls around that, particularly around our health and safety plans and how we do business within ES itself. So I think that's just a point just to raise there. The other piece is just under the risks component of the report. So at the last report, we spoke about the Jobs for Nature Andera project, the dive project. So we've made some good work, or we've moved on in that space as such. One of the key things was getting the risk plan to our executive, which the executive questioned and looked at. And most certainly, you know, there's a big piece of work that needs to be done there from a H&S perspective. But I think we definitely knocking through that and getting, you know, gaining some good ground in that space. In particular, the training side of our divers, effectively that training program was endorsed by WorkSafe. So we actually got together with WorkSafe and took them through the dive project's training program itself, which they've endorsed and are happy with, which was a big step for us, because a lot of our risk lay in that training component. And then there's other bits and pieces that we are busy working on. So for example, that risk register for the project and some various elements that we need to still work through, but I think we've made some good progress in that space already. The other piece I'd like to just talk about is something that popped up, and you are must be all very well aware of it, is the black mold in the building, or in our building, specifically around the council chambers. So that was identified. We had that assessed by K2 Environment. They gave us a report. They found sort of 3 key areas: one in the chambers, a small piece in the cafeteria, and then a piece of carpet between at an entrance into the building itself. And that was more around bacteria as opposed to mold around that entrance. So we've embarked on a program of remedial work. We've cleaned out the carpet. The carpet's been removed. That area is still being isolated because we're trying to find the leak itself where it's coming in through the door. The chamber, we've had Southern Installations in. They are a specialist contractor to deal with these things. They've removed all the black mold that was visible and that was behind the plasterboard itself. They've cleaned that all up. At the moment, we're at the stage of getting some test results back to find out whether we've, remedied the problem. So we're still waiting for a second set of results to come back, which hopefully we'll get back in the next week or so, just to kind of see whether there's any residual black mold left in the chambers themselves. And then the next step is to close up that piece of work. But this does raise another issue of, a wider piece of work around making sure that the rest of the building is fit for purpose and so on. And I think Chris has already started that piece of work. And then just from a incident perspective, so yep, only 6 incidents. And I say only, I shouldn't be even saying that, it should be 0, but six incidents reported over the quarter, and nothing of significance really, minor incidents in the grand scheme of things. Thank you.
Any questions? Councillor McCallum.
Thank you for that. Two parts. One part is, have you found the leak in the roof? And what does that actually mean for the follow-on? Because I'm wondering whether we can do some piecemeal stuff, but we haven't solved the problem, then we're going to have an ongoing problem and ongoing costs, etc. So
that's a question for Chris around the roof.
Right.
And so health and safety, mold.
Okay.
Chris and roof, although I'm sure Paul could probably answer, but just to make sure we're
Chief mold
on accountability.
Chief mold officer.
Yes. Yeah, we've got a regrading going on around.
Yeah, Chris, all over to you.
About financial allegations as well.
If I can talk to the Madam Chair
Yes.
around the roof. Yes, there is still some uncertainty about exactly where the leak is coming in. You're absolutely right, Councillor McCallum. Unless we sort that, we haven't really sorted anything apart from cleaning things up. We have architects coming in this afternoon to look at, they already know our building to a large extent, but to look around our building in terms of its general fitness for purpose and in terms of accommodation. But the second part of that is I'm going to be talking to them about the roof. It's a flat roof covered in butanol. It's 40 years old, and we're just not sure really where the leak is. So in terms of weatherproofing the building, we need to address the roof. I tend to ask the architects this afternoon for a steer on how we approach this. And I think what they're going to say is you get an engineer in and sort out where the damp is. The damp rising from the ground, or is it coming in under the roof, blowing in under the roof, or coming in through the roof? So while we have uncertainty around that, we don't know what the solution is. So I'm getting a steer from 2 architects, in fact, who are coming in today to look at our building.
if I may, Madam Chair, personal experience with butanol, it has a life expectancy.
Absolutely.
And you're past your life expectancy.
Yes.
So I would think you could be looking at re-roofing with the same product again to actually seal it up. I'm
Yes.
not sure whether we're coming up from the ground, but that's a personal view. So I'll
absolutely.
let you follow it through.
Thank you.
So let me go to my second question, which is back to you. I'd like a little bit more understanding of the incidents. There's 2 cases of negative interactions. I'd just like to know a little bit more without getting too much detail, but I'm also interested in the security breach. And the reason I say security breach is it's been quite well publicized. When you go into lockdown, you have bigger security risk because you're dealing with offsite computers and people take the opportunity to do things where they normally wouldn't do. So I'd just like a better understanding of those 2, please.
Sure. So let me address the first part of that. So that's the untoward behavior of individuals. Yeah. So both cases were interactions with landowners. One was a landowner's son, and subsequently both of the interactions were reported and received apologies from both landowners. On behalf, one on behalf of their son and the other on behalf of themselves and their behavior. So yeah, and it's something that is obviously an ongoing concern for us as an organization, as we know, with the undue pressures coming in from all directions, particularly on our landowners and so on. So it's something that we are looking at, and I'm working with the various managers that are responsible for these areas, particularly compliance, consents, and the biodiversity team, just looking at some further training looking to make sure that we are wrapping ourselves with the right management controls. So, we've got those controls in place, the more sort of kind of hard controls in the sense of things like get home safe, where am I, and all these sort of applications that we're using. But I think a lot of it is about actually reading the situation. And having spoken to the two individuals that were involved, particularly in the one incident where it was involved the landowner's son, they were quite aware of their situation. They had made adequate preparation, so the way they even parked their vehicle, not expecting anything, but they'd already thought this through as a potential hazard or risk, and they had already made those preparations, and they were able to, as a pair, deal with the situation, and got to the point where they could decide, right, we need to now get out of it or not. They didn't have to do that, but they were most certainly prepared, and they found that one of them had done some training in the past and found that very useful. So, it's an ongoing thing. It's something that, we just have to keep on working on and keep on building that resilience up, particularly on our public-facing staff. The security incident is, and maybe I'm using words that are maybe emotive there, in the sense that it was actually an individual that was found wandering through the building, trying to get to a meeting. So a visitor that had come in through a back door and was trying to find a particular meeting room. So it was an organized meeting. So we were expecting this individual to be at that meeting. They just came in through the wrong entrance. And it was picked up by one of our staff members who responded and got the person through to reception and went through the right processes. So it's from that perspective, maybe the wording was a bit, as I said, a bit emotive on my part there, but it was, it's still obviously something that we do need to manage. We do have several entrances to our buildings, and sometimes we have found people walking up the wrong pathway as such, thinking that that's a front door versus there's a front door on the other side of the building to go through. And I think from a staff perspective, I think there is a certain amount, because we are going through quite a few changes and so on. There's quite a few new faces, so there's a little bit of work just to be done, just to make sure that we are able to manage an incident like that. But I think it was fairly low risk.
Sorry, just to elaborate on Paul's point. So, with the exception of the front door, all of the other doors are locked or require a keypad card. So it was actually someone had let this person into the building.
Okay. Good follow-up though, I'm thinking. Chairman Hall, did you still have a question?
Well, Lloyd covered part of it. It was about the mould, and I guess when I was hearing it was going to take them a couple of weeks to analyse the sample, I'm thinking, really, can't we speed that up? It is a frustrating situation, and but we have to get it right. But it does seem to be moving rather slowly. So I would have thought if you had a sample to test, that you could get it back in a couple of days. But that's the contractors, obviously. So
just on that, we have changed labs now, so we're using a different lab. And we're hoping to get a quicker turnaround. So the one prior to this one was quite a long lead-in time, and they are saying that they are under the pump, but I'm not too sure whether it's COVID related or not.
Thank you. I've got Rob, I thought, but I wasn't sure. Did you have a question? No. Then Councillor McPhail and then Councillor Beard. And then
I've got two questions, but one's on vaccines. Just in regards, obviously, some farm policies now and everything that will be vaccinated with beyond farms. Obviously, Mayor point that they're interacting with. So are we getting to the point where we've got to make sure that the people that are going to interact and not going to affect health and safety policies on the farm if they're not vaccinated? COVID. So I'm just wondering, have you started thinking about that? Because it's obviously something in the future. Because the business is trying to protect. I don't want to say,
I think I would say that it's an evolving situation in relation to whether you can actually mandate mandate vaccination or not. And certainly the advice that's coming through at the moment is that it's for very, very specific cases or situations, if you like. For example, working in a childcare centre, or certainly, the government's mandated border workers. But human rights legislation still looms largely, and it will be an evolving space. And certainly, I would imagine as the country looks to review its stamp it out versus live with COVID policy, I think we might see things changing. But as it stands at the moment, it is very difficult to make the argument to mandate vaccination. It's one thing that we are keeping an eye on, though. What we are doing is we are continuing to encourage our staff to get vaccinated. That's the subject of frequent communications, and we're trying to make it as easy for them as possible in terms of freeing up work time for them to go and make sure that they get their vaccinations.
Yeah, it's probably around when you're going to people's businesses, and they have a policy that you don't turn up and you're not, and they have the right to say, no, sorry, you're not that one. It's under compliance and all these sort of things. So there's obviously let's just be open and see how we deal with it, because no doubt there will be some businesses will say no, we're not that in place.
Well, and
they may use that as an excuse too. That's what I'm just saying. You need to be able to deal with those.
And I'll let Paul maybe speak to that from a PCBU point of view.
Yes, yeah. So, most certainly from, as Amy's alluded to, most certainly from a PCBU perspective, we do expect our, areas where we have shared responsibility, that they are sharing those requirements to us, and also give us the opportunity to challenge some of those requirements, most certainly. And I think there is an opportunity here to look at how, if we are being presented with those kind of questions, how to respond to those. Because as far as vaccinations goes, the only mandatory route at the moment is through health orders, and there are several health orders which have been issued, and that's around border facing staff and some various other essential services that have those mandatory requirements. Otherwise, the rest is all voluntary. So it's something we do need to, and as Amy's already alluded to, we are watching and waiting for the right advice to come out. And at the moment, I think everyone's sort of sitting in that space at the moment.
Just another quick question, just in regards, obviously this item, the last item, talking about additional FTEs, and maybe Chris might be able to. Are these within budget on the, obviously just done in the long-term plan? Is this over and above these new additional costs? That also just come out, or are you going to fit them within the budget this year?
Some of them are within the budget. We'll be working within the budget.
Yeah.
Okay, we're working within the budget. Got a budget, we need to work within it, unless we come to you and us for more.
Good day. Bruce and then Ellen.
Oh, well, I think Ellen was in front of me.
Oh, sorry,
She's
Ellen.
been waiting probably patiently.
Way you go, Ellen.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So just a quick one first. Jeremy, you're a big voice, but we are troubling to hear it on the Zoom. So I think if you tip the mic a little bit further forward, and that'll.
Testing.
Yeah, now you're on.
Houston.
Might have more than a problem.
Yeah.
So thanks for that. It does sound like we could be without a chamber for quite a period of time. And there was a whisper or a word yesterday about considering the Emergency Management Southlands space. Is that going to be looked at further, or is that inappropriate to consider claiming that on occasions?
It's been looked at further.
Thank you.
Here we go. Bruce, finally.
Yeah, look, a couple of questions, Paul, because it's a good report, because that's why we're asking so many questions, I think. Can I just ask, I'm interested always in these situations, partly for self-interest, but actually I think also my colleagues around our due diligence responsibilities. So I'm just to understand how the system's working. So I really have got two systems questions. One of them is, I noticed this Robin Bennett review, which possibly I shouldn't have said, but I don't actually. And you've got the statement requires a review in substantial work to modernise and assure our health and safety practices. So that says to me that we're needing to upgrade. So am I right in saying that? But secondly, if that is the case, where are the significant gaps?
Yeah, so good question. So the audit done by Robin, just to clarify, was an internal audit that we commissioned. And it was really to look at our health, safety and wellbeing management system itself. So just a bit of history. So the management system was implemented after the legislation change in 2015. And a very well thought through process as such, and the management system was most probably fit for purpose then. We have just found over time and going into 2021, with the known changes in the way we do business and the maturity of New Zealand as a country from an H&S perspective, we've just found that most probably our management system has fallen behind slightly in the modern times. Now, one of the comments that Robin did make is, though we do have a adequate management system, there are gaps in areas where we just need to be focusing on to bring it back up into modern times as such. One of those areas is just around risk. One of the areas that was picked up was, not that we have a lack of assessing risk, but most certainly going back and reviewing what our risk is and assuring ourselves that the risk we're looking at is still relevant and is still that it's adequate and we've got the right controls wrapped around that. The other piece is around, just looking at from a leadership perspective and looking at about how transparent our risk is to our executive and to our leadership team, and are we doing enough to assure as a leadership team that we are managing our risk to an adequate state. And then there's just, there's quite a few kind of management gaps as such, and it's a lot of it is around administrative stuff. So a lot of it is around documentation, it's around processes and things like that that just need tweaking or fixing or renewing or revamping. And just looking at it from a time period, we foresee, it does require that step up, and it's no fault of anyone or anything within the organization. It's just we are a rapidly moving organization, and we've most probably slipped behind a bit just on the management side of things.
So I take some assurance, Paul, that actually Robin was basically saying you're generally okay, but I think
yes,
I presume she's saying, but you better, you're warned, you better pick up the process. But that's great. So thank you for that. It's great to have that clarity. I'd like to suggest, Lyndall, for us as elected, for you folk as elected members, me as independent, this is really critical, because our role is the due diligence factors, and this is about the systems. So in terms of supporting you, Paul and Amy, I'd like to think that we would have some regular reporting that, what is the timeline? When are we going to modernise by, and when we'll be able to actually for ourselves verify that? That's straight out of the due diligence book, section 44 of the Act, if you want to go to it. That's not the Bluff Act, I can assure you. So look, my other question, it's a wee bit systems, although it's results. I got myself into trouble yesterday in Gisborne asking this question, Paul, so I'll be careful how I say this. I'm very interested in the level of near-miss reporting. So it's really important that we understand, as we have, and I appreciate the questions, what actually has happened. But the critical thinking behind near-miss reporting, I'm telling you how to suck eggs here, but I'm stating my understanding, is that is, if you will, front-loading the issue. It's our indication of what could happen if we don't address an issue. So it's not a lag indicator, it's a lead indicator, in terminology which you know too well. It does suggest then that actually if our health and safety culture is spot on, we probably should have quite a high level of near-miss reporting. Rather than actual incidents, because actually we've got that going. And I've had some health and safety experts give me some sense of the ratio which is actually quite high. You know, it'd be double digit to every incident that you have. Are you happy with the level of near incident reporting? And this is where I got into trouble yesterday, and I cannot tell you where I was. Do we have a culture within the organisation where near miss reporting is encouraged? Because we have that, we can then deal to it. But if we don't, all we're dealing with then is the events afterwards, and we might have the egg on our face.
Yep. So a couple of answers to that question. So yes, I think we do have a good culture of near miss reporting. I think it's something that the operational teams in specific are aware of, and they most certainly understand what it means to report and why we report it. I guess where we are falling down potentially is that a lot of it is anecdotal type reporting, so it's not necessarily going through the due process. So something is being reported, there's most probably a localized fix being done, but it's not working its way all the way up through the system and getting a proper investigation. And because, as an organization, we are divisional, we are not sharing the learnings across our divisions. So yes, I think that is where our gap sits, is most certainly in tidying up the process on how we, that we are managing those reports. But from a cultural perspective, I think, the as I said, the anecdotal reporting that I'm getting from the ground as such is good. People are talking about it, and they are reporting it. But as I said, it's just we are most probably failing just in taking it through the giving it its due process.
Look, that's great to know. And I'm sort of putting my hand up and saying I will always be looking for the near miss reporting and what are the lead indicators.
Yeah.
That we were doing it. So actually, in the long run, I got to the same point yesterday. Can I say where clearly there was a lot going on about health and safety from a cultural perspective. We're talking. The reality of it is, Lyndall, we actually have to be able to have a visibility over that. And if I only see, look, and I don't know, I tried to add up how many near miss reports we've got, perhaps 3 or 4. I'm sort of saying, well, actually, that's not the right number.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I take your point. So look, that's great. Thank you. And I suspect that's all wrapped up in what Robin's given you. So I've already made my play that I'll be keen to see how you respond to Robin's report. So I'll leave it there. Thank you, Lyndall.
Thanks very much, Bruce. Good point, actually. My only comment is that I'm pleased to see that you're catering to the neurodiverse within us and providing graphs and tables. Everybody interprets information in different ways. So thank you. Somebody like to move that report, please?
Happy to.
Thank you, Bruce, and seconded Councillor McPhail. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Thanks, carried. Thanks very much, Paul. And moving swiftly on to item 3, because we're just about on time. Information management update, please, Jane. Thank you very much. Take it away, and Paula.
Good morning, all. We'll play a bit of a tag team here between Paula and myself, and if Amy wants to add anything as we go through, I'll take the report as read. And so the highlights within the report are obviously the restructure of the information management team and making that official with Paula's new role in that records information area, and also we're us both working a lot closer together to try and deliver a vision and a strategy for a way forward. That piece of work is underway, and we'll have a strategy hopefully before the end of the year is our aim, with a roadmap and what that digital transformation looks like for the organisation and for us as a team, and with a high focus on customer service. Moving on to the customer contact management project, which has been underway for a while. We've got formalisation of groups, we've got processes in place, we've got software to be able to measure and to be able to update our contacts, and so the next stage is actually reinvigorating that group with a couple of lumpy bits with COVID stops and other restructures and things that have slowed that project down a little bit. We successfully upgraded our document management system just prior to our level 4 lockdown, which enabled working from home a lot easier for our users. So we were really pleased with the uptake of a very modern and fresh browser that enables that work from home a whole lot easier, and the uptake has been good. There's a wee graph there for you, Lyndall, that shows that. And yeah, I think that the big thing is about us working closer together to be able to deliver more. Questions?
Thanks. Questions, councillors? Councillor McCallum?
Thank you, Madam Chair. 2 questions really. I'll deal with report 1 first, but I want to raise a highlight overall as well. With the report, I think what I see, the journey is okay. I need to see a little bit more detail before I can comment too much on it. And I'd really like to see how customers find this new approach down the track. So happy with the journey you're on, what you're doing, but we can often see things from our point of view, but I want to understand where the customers actually find, no matter who they are, how they interact, and whether it's simple and easy, that sort of stuff. So that's that comment. Let me jump back up to the overall. Over the last couple of 3 meetings, the same terminology is coming through. There seems to be new directorates being employed in the reorganisation, but I'm not sure how that structure works and how it works within the CE, the next layer and the next layer. Are we renaming? I'm not sure who they are, and I'm not sure what the roles and responsibilities are. Now, I have asked in the past for an updated contact list because our green sheet one that we have is out of date. But we're seeing a number of things come through now that we need to understand, without criticism, the structure of the people that are put in place and what their responsibilities are. We saw it yesterday in consents and compliance. I have a view, but I don't want to say what my view is until I understand how the new structure is, because I think there's going to be some changes there to what we saw before to what we have now. So I'd like to get a better understanding then how that flows down through the organisation. So I'm wondering, Madam Chair, I know it's a little bit outside of this paper, but in the general sense, I'd actually like to get a little bit more of a feel of how these things are being populated.
Is that something that we can do in terms of a small briefing where we could all take the opportunity to come and present to you and give you the overall structure, and then we can tell you a little bit more about what we're doing in our respective areas, the thinking behind that, and what impacts.
That would be fine. If you go, remember we go back, we had that sheet with all the names across the top and had all the columns coming down.
Yeah.
I think that's been greatly changed. I think it's quite different if I understand what's coming through. And I think for our interaction with staff, we'd like to understand that framework a bit better. I'm not saying no, don't do it. I'm just saying I just need to see a bit more transparency, because I really only see level 1, Rob, and 2, the exec team underneath, but I'm not sure what's happening further down.
Councillor, you're talking about and like an organisational chart. Is that, yeah.
And an introduction to some of the new staff, because
there's names that I don't know.
We don't necessarily know names and faces, so a wee session would be good. Thanks.
I think I'd just like to reiterate that, and obviously the meeting in Gore, I said, we introduced ourselves and I'm going, they work for years. They work for years. I found out there was a couple of new faces there. I'm sitting there going, okay, that's really good. I don't know all the people, and that it would make even everyone, just to have that.
Yeah, great. We'll make
connection
that. Somebody will make that happen. Thank you, Amy. Wonderful.
Leave it with me.
Thank you. Bruce, you had a question?
Well, actually, it's interesting because it was exactly the same as yours. It wasn't because of the acronym ODT, and I should be careful to speak to media in the room, but it was the Organisational Development and Transformation Directorate. So I get the idea. I mean, I could. It sounds like a really smart idea, but it made me wonder: is this just I thought, oh, is this for the whole council, or is it just within the IM team? And indeed, what are some of the steps? It sounds like a good, strong way to do it. So I think it's more than just the people. It's actually what are some of the drivers for change in the organisation, given it's something that we in this committee have talked about a number of times for a while. So it's good to know what's driving that through. So Jane, I've got a couple of really sort of quick ones. So look, my picky point about Iris and the rates database, that's still 2 and means duplication. can't we use one?
Yes, we can. That'll come in phase 2 with once we start to move towards Iris Next Gen. That is a full CRM, so customer relationship management system that will then feed back into the rates database.
Sweet, that's called Nirvana, isn't it? One source of truth. Okay.
And it's certainly what I have been striving for a long time, and it'll be better than the multiple sources right now.
Oh, look, it is. And I mean, Jane, I know from my other work that you are just facing the same challenge every other council around the country is. You know, a little database going. But well done on implementing the next version of Objective. Can I just check on that graph? Unique IQ users, and they're going up over time on the whole. How many should there be? Who's not using the system? I know a negative sounding person, but I want to know if you're making good use of it.
So my count of users is always about 200, and HR's count of users is about 170. So we're averaging about 164-ish. So it's not a bad number, and Paula can actually give you some more detail on that, Bruce.
Okay, so with regards to the graph, we're actually looking at the unique IQ users. So effectively with Objective now, because we've got a browser platform and what's called the Navigator platform, there's 2 platforms that can be used. So this is actually purely looking at the browser login. So the standard end users are effectively using browser. And that's a really good number, 164, considering that, yeah, on standard, I'd say about 180 users. And for the rest of us who live in Navigator, and Navigator is really the platform where the administrators and the records team work, because there's a whole lot of different functionality and metadata and quality assurance that occurs in the Navigator side of things that looks after the data for the records. So we're sitting in that platform more, and we do have some users that haven't quite made that lovely transition over into the browser, and they're still working in Navigator. So what I can actually probably say with quite confidence is the main base of our users, the 180, are using the system, whether that's in Navigator or browser. What we're trying to do with our standard users is get them mainly into the IQ or the browser system.
Brilliant. You got to winkle out us serial abusers. I mean, again, here's the importance of the cultural dimension of a central repository, our database, which is actually, we all use it, and we know we've got all the information. So I take the point. Look, one final question, and it was funny. I don't know why I read all the little bits of the standard bits to papers, which were considerations, legal implications. Can I just assume that we also have a good sense of Privacy Act protocols and issues and lenses over our data retention? And I must confess that was particularly around even the simple things like our Iris and rates database.
Okay, that's me. Being the privacy officer for the organisation, we're actually doing a lot of work in this space at the moment, understanding the fact that the Privacy Act has been refreshed and renewed in December 2020. We've been working with Wynne Williams to actually put in place an internal privacy policy that currently is in draft. It's actually just at the point where it's needing reviewed by Amy, the General Manager. It will then be taken to exec, and that will hopefully define some matters for the rest of the organisation. Once we have our internal policy in place, we're also refreshing our external policy, which sits on the website. So to actually communicate to the community what it is we collate with regards to their data. We've refreshed that as well. We've also refreshed our disclosure statements on our forms that go out for submission from the website as well. We're updating that statement so that it's consistent. So they're getting consistent message about what data we collect and what data we may release depending on what it is they're submitting. So we're updating that as well. And once we've got that all in one space, for the whole organisation, we'll be pushing out an organisational training around privacy and Lagoima because they actually connect. So that's our program of work that's coming. It was my aim to actually have that training out by the end of September. With lockdown, we've had a little bit of a hold up, but we are just about there. So that's where we're at with regards to that space. Yes, we have a good understanding of privacy, but it has to be refreshed, and our people need to understand that each individual needs to take ownership of that. And that's probably one of the big things we'll be communicating out.
And just on the back of that, Bruce, is that we have a full suite of security policies that go with that around IS, IM, IT. So yeah.
That's good. Thank you for that. That's a good answer. Appreciate that.
Thanks. I've got Councillor McCallum quickly and then me quickly.
Just clarification, if I could, just getting back to the graph, could you indicate, I have in my mind that we've got about 150, 160 staff. That number seems to be higher. So is there people outside of our actual staff and councillors that have access to Objective Connect? And also, how do we monitor that between new staff, old staff, or previous staff, and access to data? Could you just comment on that, please?
I'll start and then Paula can finish. Is that we have, so it's all licensed. So we have to stick within our licensing that we have full auditing, and it's all controlled by access through our security systems. And also we have full auditing. So, and where the numbers differ is there are contractors that can access our system, and that we all have authorization through once they've been through all the processes to get into our system. Plus we have councillors who access our system through Connect, and then we have part-timers which aren't taken into account of the FTE. So that's where there's variation in the numbers.
Thank you.
That was my question. I was wondering why we had an uncertain number across the.
Yes. So we have 200 active IT users.
Right.
They aren't necessarily all paid by ES.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else? We could move on.
Yeah. I just one question, Madam Chair.
Oh, yep. Sorry, Alan.
Yeah, so I asked the question, I think the last time we had you in the room, about login renewals for councillors, and you indicated it was coming soon. As yet, we still haven't had notification to change our passwords, and so we're still sitting with our same passwords from day one. And I think that is a weakness that we should be prompted more regularly to revise and strengthen our passwords.
Yeah, unfortunately, Alan, what happened was black mold in the council chambers getting shut down. You need to be in the building to change the password. So there is a simple flow. Sorry, I should rephrase that. It is easier for you to be in the building to change your password. So it flows for when you're not in the building. So I think from that last meeting, I'm not sure that you've actually been in the building very often. If you have a concern, please pop in and we can change it. So that's so all staff change their passwords in July.
Is there a prompt though that sort of says to us your password could expire and
yes? So through the audit process that we've been through, the new password policy, and so there needs to be some comms about this. We'll be moving to a 14-word password, and according to statistics and the auditor, is a 14-word pass, and it's a passphrase, not a password. A 14-word passphrase cannot be cracked. So they're saying that you said it once, and unless you want to change it, you don't need to change it again. So, but we need to do a whole lot of comms around that as well. And we'll be moving to multi-factor authentication for accessing Objective Connect and into Office 365.
Making my head hurt, Joe.
I know, so yeah. So all your issues will be addressed, Alan.
All right, be careful what I wish for. That's why the sound.
Yeah, precisely.
Don't wish for too much.
Yeah, I have goodness me. Anyway, thank you. Good question. Right, we've had a mover, Chairman Horrell's moved the recommendation. Councillor McPhail, second. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Thanks very much, team, way over there. And nice to welcome Paul and Ali to give us item 4, which is the economic recovery projects update.
Morning, everyone. Hopefully you can
Hi,
hear me
Ali.
okay.
Oh, not really, but that's probably our end more than yours.
Is that any better?
Get us wee bit, thanks.
Okay, I'll hold this here. I think Raymond's going to drive the computer for me, I think.
You didn't know that, did you, Raymond?
Full of confidence.
Watch a computer.
Fantastic. Okay, so hopefully everyone's got some slides now. Yep. Cool. Good morning, everybody. I'm just going to quickly run through an update on Jobs for Nature. And then I'll pass over to Raymond in the room to update you on the climate resilient ones. So next slide, please.
Started well.
Shelley's just started, wasn't she?
Sure, it's going. I'm not sure.
Cool. So everyone hopefully remembers that we've got the 6 different Jobs for Nature projects that we've got funding through last financial year. They're from a range of different funders, from MFE, DOC, Predator Free 2050 and MPI. And we have just done the count up of all of the jobs that were created last year, so up until the end of July. And we produced employment for 162 different individuals from these projects last year. So we've actually managed to reach quite a large number of people, which is fantastic. But I really wanted to look at the last quarter, so you know where we've been going so far. So next slide, please. So this is what we've been working on since the 1st of July. And so we're nearly at the end of that first quarter for this year. So the biodiversity action on the ground, we've got the 3 key pieces of work. The first one is producing ecological surveys of 70,000 hectares over this year and developing a really good database to hold all of the information we're creating. So we have now entered into contract with Wildlands Consultants. They are a really good ecological provider. They are in the process now of setting up an office in Invercargill, and we'll be employing 5 or 6 full-time ecologists just to work on this project for us. They've now got all of our information and all of our maps, and we're working with them on all of the contact details so that they can actually start getting out there, talking to landowners and getting this work happening on the ground. We're also working with them on the comms and branding so that everything that goes out, it looks like it's Environment Southland, and we've got full oversight of what they're doing and what they're producing. And all of that data comes back into ES and becomes owned by us for future uses. The second piece of work is around the management plans, and that's once we know what's there, working with landowners on getting the management plans so they know what to do and working with them on that. We've managed to complete 4 over the winter, and this is going to be a really big focus for the team over the summer, is going out to as many landowners as possible and really working on good management practices. It's going to be things like pest control, weed control, fencing, potentially removing stock from wetlands. That's the sort of things we're going to be looking at with that bit of the project. And then our active management, it's helping fund people to do those pieces of work. So we've had a good review of the Environmental Enhancement Fund scheme, which many of you will be familiar with from previous years. And we are going to bring some suggested changes to Council on the 13th of October to get them approved, just to make sure that the grants are as aligned as possible to this funding. And so we can scale up quickly to we've got $300,000 to get out this year for those grants, which is significantly bigger than any previous year. So we need to be really agile and need to be able to get on with that. We had hoped to have that in front of council before now, so we are a little bit delayed, which is why we're currently sitting as orange on that project. But I think on the 13th of October, if we get a really good steer from council, we'll be able to just get out there and get going. And I'm pretty confident with the rest of summer, we're going to be back on track pretty quickly with this project. The fish passage one, we are pretty much under control and just waiting for the water levels to subside. So we can't do any work in the streams and fix any fish passages until those water levels drop again for summer. We are really well through our number of barriers. We were supposed to be checking. We were hoping to get to 800. We've already done 540. So I think we're going to absolutely smash that target over the next 4 years of the project. And we're working closely with Te Marama on making sure we're including Mahinga Kai advice into our prioritisation. And we've also got a PhD student on board to do some case studies. So they're going to be looking at the stream pre and post the work to check to see whether the fish passage is actually working or not. And we're just going to take a couple of our fish passages for that research. So next slide, please. So these are the two dock projects. The first one is the Fiordland weeding buffer one with that. We are looking at having teams starting again on Monday. So we've got new contracts in place for this coming season, and we're going to have people out there. But one of the bits of this project, you'll remember, is that we're going through residential sections and trying to remove weed species, pest plant species from people's gardens. Now, we are finding that some of those species are people's hedges and property boundaries. And we don't really want to be removing people's hedges and property boundaries in privacies without a lot of discussion and something to replace them and things like that. So just flagging with everybody now that we have identified a risk. It's a perception risk. It's a public. We really want to work with landowners. Don't want to turn everyone aside because we've ripped out their hedges. So we're going to navigate our way through that, and we'll probably come and talk to you again once we've worked out our way through and how big a problem it actually is, and how many hedges may or may not be involved. Hopefully it's not as bad as it could be. So that's that one. And Daria was chugging away really, really well until we hit COVID. We've got the training was underway in Milford Sound, but unfortunately we're not able to train under level 3 and 4. So our original 10 drivers had to stop. They are now back in the water in Milford Sound, but the second bit of training is up in Auckland. So until Auckland drops to level 2, we cannot complete our diver training. And it is a risk that we can't do anything about. Our only other potential provider for that training is Otago University, and they've said the earliest they could do it now is May. So we are really just holding fire and waiting for Auckland to come out of lockdown. The other big bit of that project is that we've been spending the winter working on procurement and some contract negotiations for all of the associated costs. So things like getting a vessel that the divers can live on in Breaksea Sound, making sure we've got helicopter transfers underway, and the true cost of all of the training. We are now in a position where we can quite carefully say, this is what it's going to cost, this is what each of those services is going to cost, and this is how many dive hours we can get. And it is showing that our budgets are going to be super tight to meet the number of FTEs we had originally told DOC it's going to be. So we're now just making sure that DOC are very, very clear on the budgets, the number of FTEs we can guarantee, and the number that we think we would like to be able to expand it to. So we will be, before we enter into any of these true contracts with the helicopters and the vessels and things, we are going to be just double check that DOC are happy with where we've got to and the costs of these things. We don't want to start committing hundreds of thousands of dollars in vessel costs if we think that DOC might pull the funding at some point because we're not meeting our FTEs. So I think it's under control. I think we DOC are happy with what we're doing, but I want to get that in writing before we enter into these big contracts. Cool. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is the last two. This is the Predator-Free 2050 one for Predator-Free Southland and the lead-in phase for the Ararua. This is bright red because we are currently without a funding deed. The original $100,000 funding deed expired at the end of June. Predatory 2050 are drafting a funding deed for the next $5 million. It is being promised and promised and promised, and we have not seen a funding deed. So until we get that deed and we know that we've got that $5 million, we can't employ new staff. We can't do anything with the project. So we're very much waiting on them before we can move forward on that. We have got the good news in terms of the lotteries funding that's come through and the Environment Southland money, but we really need that predatory Southland money to predatory 2050 money to make it viable and worthwhile. So that is our big risk at the moment. And the last one, Wild and Conifer Project 1. So MPI have now confirmed all of our budget for this coming year. We're looking at 2.3 million, of which the majority of it's going to go to Mid-Dome as normal, but we're also, they're going to continue to fund the Takatimu Management Unit, which was brought on last year. We are going to be contracting that work down to the Department of Conservation. So it's all on their land. So they will be doing all of the work and we will just be the funding provider for it and checking all of their health and safety. Mid-Dome is going to continue to be managed through the Mid-Dome Wild and Conifer Tree Trust and the work they do with Boffa-Miskel. And we're just working with them at the moment to make sure that all of the contract requirements that we get from MPI for the money filter down to the trust, and then they filter down to Boffa-Miskel and all of the subcontractors. So all of the health and safety, all of the funding clauses within that top deed fund all the way through down to the base level. So we're not missing anything. And we're also making sure that a lot of the health and safety learnings from last year are very much included in the operational plan for this year. So things like the notification around spray events and auditing of contractors up on the hill, it's all going to be built right into the operational plan from the start this year. So hopefully we can avoid some of the niggles we had last year. And the other thing on that is last year, you'll remember we had an absolutely huge aerial spray operation with the 700 hectares. We're not doing anywhere near as much as that this year. This year, we're going to focus on the aerial wand spraying, where we're doing individual trees that are more sparsely removed with a helicopter rather than big wide scale boom spraying. There will be boom spraying, but not to the scale that it was last year. And there'll be a lot more groundwork as well. And then the last little bit of that is just Bluff Hill, and the work that we weren't able to finish last financial year is going to start on Monday and should be finished by the end of October. I think that's all I had for Jobs for Nature. If you'd like to do questions now or at the end.
Questions? We have one from Councillor McCallum.
A couple of quick things. It would be nice, I think, to understand what the fish passage actually look like and how they actually work in different flows. I don't know whether full councillors understand that or not. And the second thing is, it would be nice to see a picture of the whiting conifer, of whiting pines, just what you're actually dealing with, because I've seen a different landscapes of that. It's a little bit detaily, but we get a better understanding of where we've got density of trees or whether it's a sparseness of trees and how we're dealing with it.
Yep, sure, we can do that. So we have different densities up on the different hills. We do the aerial boom spraying when we've got the really, really dense areas. So this year we're dealing with less dense, but we can definitely bring a picture and help you show that. And also the scale, because I know it's very easy for me to say 700 hectares of boom spraying, but until you've got that on a map and a visual, it's really hard to see that. So we can maybe do that for the next one.
And the first passage one, Elliot, it's really about understanding, because we hear about these things, but what do they actually look like in real life? So I think once people see how simplistic they are, maybe we don't have to do all of them. They may do some themselves. So it's just a matter of understanding how they fit in.
Yep, absolutely. And that's what we're hoping, that these are the cheap, quick fixes. We're not talking about the great big rock walls and removing weirs. We can't afford to do that. So these are the simple ones that anyone can do. So yeah, we can bring some pictures.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ellie. Just something from me. I was going to ask if we could have your verbal report as a written report, so that we've got trackability and accountability through our own minuting and stuff. But I'm also aware that you've got a similar report in the Regional Services Committee. So can we just maybe offline have a discussion about what parts could come as in written form to this committee, and which parts are more relevant for regional services? Because I guess we need to look at the risk work and the accountability for things, as a lot of it's government funding. Yeah, just a way. So I don't want to give you lots of work to do, but there must be a way where we can split that off maybe.
Yeah. It might be a question for Chris, but I believe that the intention is that Boff and Miskell are going to take over these reports.
Yes, I've already had conversation with them about the need for written report, Madam Chair.
Great.
Said that we need that just for the, if nothing more for the record,
Yeah.
if nothing else, rather than just the verbal. They undertake to start providing that from the next meeting here.
Great. Okay.
This would be the final verbal, the verbal report on its own is the final time.
Lovely, thank you. Bruce, oh, sorry, Alan, every time I look at you, you're not waving.
Oh, okay.
I'll stare at you the whole time.
We'll carry on.
Thank you.
So just a question really on the 70,000 hectares and that land area. Is there, or could there be some confusion in the region over work that the Southland District Council might have been going to do in looking at Indigenous biodiversity, and then it's sort of pulled back from because of a few reasons, and ourselves now coming through with an interest in looking at 70,000 hectares across the province? So can you just elaborate a little bit about what you were looking, or how that 70,000 hectares was determined, and what are we looking for?
Sure. So there is a real risk that this is going to get mixed up with the significant natural areas that may be required under the National Policy Statement, Indigenous Biodiversity. What we are offering is a free ecological survey that helps landowners know what they've got and helps landowners know how to look after it. What the district councils are looking for is whether that hits criteria, whether those areas meet significance criteria or not. They will be focused on terrestrial. We are focused on wetlands and terrestrial as well. We will be encouraging landowners to let us share our data with SDC so that SDC don't have to do a secondary survey, so that there's only one that's done. But if landowners say no, we won't be sharing it unless Southland Lagoima is for it. Ours is a long established project. We've been doing this since 2002, I think, working with different landowners. And it's really bad timing that we're upscaling it at the same time that Southland District have got these new things in place that they're trying to do. And we're going to need to navigate this really carefully and be really clear with landowners about what we're collecting the data for, what it's going to be used for, and what it could mean for them. Ours is very much voluntary, and it's very much, it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't put any requirements on properties and things like that, but it is going to be really easy to confuse. The 70,000 has come from, we've done a lot of, and I think I've had these maps up in front of council before, work on prioritisation, so identifying where we think the best bang for buck of protecting biodiversity is, based on a tool that's used nationally called Zonation, and it looks at all of the different Indigenous biodiversity you think you've got and says, if you're going to spend money on somewhere, it should be this. The map of Southland of that top biodiversity is 600,000 hectares. When we were looking for projects that were shovel ready, we said to MFE, well, we know we need to do at least 600,000 hectares of biodiversity work in Southland. They funded half of that, which is 300,000. So that's what our target is for the funding, is to try and do half of the biodiversity work we know that we need to do. And then of that, the team have been working with MFE on scheduling that across, if we do 70,000 a year for the, I think we've got, I'm going to get my numbers wrong, but we have like a year of 70,000 and then 80,000 and then 80,000 and then across the funding. So if we don't hit 70,000 this year, we might be able to roll a bit over, but sort of where the number came from.
Okay, and so if land had already been put into QE2 trust, could that be captured in this, or is it more likely to be land that's not in QE2 trust?
No, absolutely. So a lot of landowners that have got QE2 know that it's a QE2, but they don't know what's there. So we would be very much be encouraging those landowners. We can find out what's there, and then we can help funding them through the Environmental Enhancement Scheme to look after it, because QE2 doesn't have a lot of funding to those. So they're exactly the properties. We know if you've got a QE2, you're going to look after it. So let's work with those people first and fund them so they can keep working on their properties and look after them. Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thanks. One final question. Councillor
Just a point that was brought up there in regards to our work, and we store that data. We're not allowed to give it to anyone, but if someone wanted to search for it, another council, would we have to, in regards to SNAs, I'm just trying to work out, obviously there are groups that are pretty anti anyone coming on their property, but if we have a risk and then we have got data there and it gets accessed by other councils, we have to give it over. I'm just trying to work out, is that correct? Like we can store it, but we don't have to give it to, well, yeah, I'm just trying to work out where the data sits and are people able to access that through Lagoina or.
So as with all council data, and Paula might be able to help with a little bit, but it is Lagoinable unless there's a reason for privacy or a reason where we would put somebody at risk by sharing that data. So it's no different to any other data that ES collect. And so the same with farm plans and things like that, it is possible to be Lagoimed, and then we need to decide if it's appropriate to respond to that Lagoima or not.
So in theory, we could have the data that the other councils need, and they could access that under the SNAs without even going onto the property.
Yeah, and so our preference is that we actually explain to the landowners that that is what the data could be used for, and the benefits of them allowing that to be done for free without having to pay South London district rates twice to get it done twice, and to work through that process with them rather than. But if they say no, they say no.
So it'd be quite upfront with it.
We want to be really, really upfront with them. And I think, as I said, we've been doing this since 2002. Back in 2016, we contacted everybody that had a high value area report before with a reminder, this is what the data can be used for, and asking permission to use it as part of the wider mapping project. And of the people that responded, 90%, I think, were happy that we used the data, and only a very few said, no, you will not use our data for anything other than the original intent. So we're trying to be really open with everybody about what we're collecting data for, what it's used for, and the risks or possible uses of that.
Yeah, so that other people could use that data as well. So they've been informed of that.
Yes.
Yep.
Last one, Chairman Horrell.
It's all, being somebody who's actually had one of those done, they are quite comprehensive. They're a valuable database, and the bulk of people, because it's normally native bush or other forms of biodiversity that we're not going to want to cut down or whatever else. So if the government was just to smooth out the concerns about potential significant biodiversity, you've got to fence it off and get out of it. I think most people would be pretty good about it all. We've had discussions in the past about the fact we've got the expertise rather than the Southern District Council in this area, and it would actually be good to be able to have that joined up thing rather than one person having responsibility and then coming back to us with information or doing double handling, which is inefficient.
Thank you. Thanks, Ellie.
All right. See you this afternoon.
Indeed. Somebody like to move that recommendation, please.
I'll move.
Still got another half to go.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, Raymond. I did that to you last time as well.
Can we have the presentation back up?
While we're waiting, can I like the question, by the way, about how to, what information we come. Can I say, I think what I won't ask as a question today, but I think would be useful in terms of a written report is actually we have, if I understand it correctly, Rob, controls around the total projects. This is the group. It would be good for us to know those controls are working. Okay, because actually I think, again, if we are a risk and a performance group, while it's important, in fact, almost wanted to come to your regional services committee because I enjoy the stories. Our critical need is actually, have we got appropriate control? So for instance, I'd love to know, is that group working and meeting? I'd love to know that we've got appropriate controls, the whole thing, procurement, what have you. I would especially like to know that our reporting to these funding agencies is being delivered and we're hitting their milestones. Because they have, I presume, quite strict criteria in terms of reporting and meeting and therefore being able to claim. So I think for the purposes of OPAC, Lyndall, it would be really valuable if we thought, though that's the sort of information we should have as well.
Thank you. Yep, that's perfect.
The helm doesn't seem to be working, unfortunately. There we go. There we go.
Wonderful. Thank you. Take it away.
Part two, climate resilience projects. So I guess just backing up on that point, as I've noted in the first couple of bullet points on this slide. So there is regular reporting through to Kanoa. And we've been working fairly actively since the last update to update our project plans with Kanoa. We've reduced the number of projects, condensed, combined projects to take the number of projects from 10 down to 6, which has eased our reporting requirements and has taken a little bit of the heat off us as well too, in terms of getting all of those projects up and running and meeting the reporting requirements that Kanoa have set for us. Yeah. And again, on that subject, received some very positive feedback from the advisory board, the last advisory board meeting, around the effort that we put into updating our project plans. Yeah, so and clearly that maintaining that good positive relationship with Kanoa, the funding agency, is a fairly important part of project delivery. So really just the 4 bullet points below that. So the Stead Street detailed design is underway. We have an interactive workshop with WSP next week just to work through some elements of the design, safety and design, foundation details, those sorts of things. So that work is well advanced at the moment. We've also been working on putting professional services arrangements in place across all of the projects, and that's largely the case now. There's a couple that we're still working on, but we largely have those arrangements in place now. Focus from my perspective remains on those key critical path tasks, and we've been focusing on those and talk about those in a bit more detail in the next couple of slides. And then I think just diving back to the last item, talking about a number of objective users. One of those objective users is the contractor that we have working on the climate resilience project, who obviously has external remote access into objective. She's been coming up to speed. There's a lot to take on board, but we have just in the last week or so updated the comms page on the website. Hopefully you'll be able to navigate your way to that fairly easily and find a profile on all of those 6 projects. Sorry, the technology's failed again. So in terms of the 6 projects, wire, probably not a lot to note with wire. Not much has changed since the last update. That one's largely complete. I'm just waiting for, as everyone is, things to dry out at the moment before we complete that project. Stead Street, as I say, the detailed design is well underway. Pumps are being manufactured as we speak. Largely working to program at the moment in terms of completion date. I've said somewhat boldly there, no significant critical path tasks there. That doesn't mean that the pumps might not get stolen by Somalian pirates on the way here or something like that. But in terms of relative to the other projects, things are fairly well lined up with that. There is some cost pressure there, so we have already committed that additional $500,000 to fish friendly pumps. There may well be other cost pressures once we complete that detailed design in terms of the build cost for the station. I'm picking there will be, and that will obviously be something that I'll need to bring back to council once we have that clear picture on what the overall delivery cost is likely to be for that pump station work. And then the other one, again, diving back to some of the earlier items, the level of activity in the construction market and the time we're going to be going to market is not ideal, but there's not much we can do about that. One of the items I've got to note for regional services that I'll note now is that we're having problems again with the existing pumps. So we are breaking out another box of band-aids for the existing pumps. One of them sounds like the bearings have probably gone. They're old pumps, so that there's no off-the-shelf parts for them. So we're potentially talking about 20-30K for a repair bill to repair that pump. I'm loath to do that, so we're going to try and nurse it along as much as we can, but given how much rain we've had, that's a challenge in itself as well too. So I'm walking a bit of a fine line around that at the moment. In terms of Invercargill City Stop Bank upgrades, so that's the combined Otapuni, Kingswell and Waihopai. We have completed some initial geotechnical investigation prior to lockdown. We're close to appointing a consultant to undertake that detailed design. That one's probably the one that's the furthest behind of all of the projects, is that Invercargill City project, and noted the key cost pressure there with Otapuni. Happy to take any questions if anyone wants, or I've got a couple more slides.
Just one I could ram, just the Stead Street pumps. I just noticed in your reporting the fish friendly passage is affecting this. Was this a scope or a specification question not considered at the start?
Exactly that. So and I think, as I've noted previously, it's good to bear in mind the context in terms of the way that these projects were prepared.
Yeah.
The fairly short notice request from government. Paddy working from home,
yes,
putting these together.
Yeah.
Not all of the cost estimating was necessarily perfect because of the haste that was required for all river managers across the country. So as I understand it, the concept that was priced at that stage was conventional axial flow pumps and not fish friendly pumps. So obviously added costs in terms of the pumps themselves, and I'm picking it'll add costs to the station construction. But you have a little bit of good news, and that is we've done the site geotech and found that the depth of the heart is shallower than we thought it would be. So we're not going to have to pile quite as far to get to heart, and that there will be some cost savings in that, but I'm still picking the net effect will be.
So Environment South, let's pick up that net effect. We can't encourage MB to come to.
Well, that's on my to-do list,
yeah.
and that's the importance of the relationship with Kanoa. I'm hoping that there's a conversation that we can have with them. Kanoa are very interested in added value with these projects. There's the fundamental flood protection, climate resilience, but the enhancement component, fish passage, all of those sorts of things is music to their ears, and I'm hoping that we might be able to capitalise on that and potentially ask them for a little bit more money. I'm not sure the chances of that, but I'll give it a go. So the other three are the projects all relating to the Mataura. As noted, second bullet point, we had an update meeting with Gore District Council on Monday. I think that was a pretty productive conversation. Looking at Councillor McPhail, who was there, gave them a full update as to where the projects are at. Fairly high level of interest. We had the Mayor, CE, and I think most of the councillors there from Gore District Council gave an overview on that project. So we have appointed a consultant for that project. We are well into the detailed design. The consultant was there. We're looking at scheduling another meeting with Gore District Council in November, and I'm hoping then we'll have a little bit more detail that we can show them. A lot of discussion around trees again, and that's obviously going to be a tricky path to navigate, and some of the strength of feeling around that. It's an unavoidable risk. In terms of Mataura, that's condensing Waimumu, Boundary Creek and the main Mataura stock banking into that $6 million project. So that detailed design is underway. Construction has commenced. One of the things that, and I think I might cover this in the last slide, one of the things that, one of the ones we've had in the last wee while is the definition of construction underway. According to Kanoa, that bar has been lowered a little bit. Technically, if we cut down a tree, then construction is underway. I know that might sound a little odd, but it all helps in terms of meeting the milestones for funding and I guess not being as under the pump as we might have been otherwise with Kanoa around progress. So noted there with Mataura, key critical path tasks, rock wrap supply and consenting. We are working through those issues at the moment and trying to squeeze some of the risk out of those particular areas. And with Wyndham, note there in second bullet point, again, a little bit late out of the blocks, but initiating that discussion with SDC. So I made contact with SDC and meeting with them. I think one of their councillors and their community board share next week, just to give them a high level overview of the project. A lot of the stock banking around Wyndham sits on SDC owned land. So it's a fairly important conversation, not only with the TA, but obviously as the landowner as well. And I've kind of noted land entry agreements there. So there is some of the stock bank that sits on private land as well to have an obviously conversation.
There's a commonality there of through all those slides of pressure on costs. When will you have a better indication of that cost pressure, and when will we have a plan to actually deal with that? Because I think these projects are too important to have funding issues. So we need to, from a committee perspective, we need to make sure we're over that early. We know that there's pressure now, and if there's pressure building, we need to understand what the options are going forward around securing the funding to complete the project. Last thing one's an incomplete project.
And noting in the Gore upgrade there, I've got key cost pressure as scope creep. And I think that's inevitable with all of these projects as they evolve. There are potentially other components that get added in, and that was part of the conversation with Gore the other day around sort of identifying other issues that they felt needed consideration. And I guess, you know, if I pick on that particular project, I'm not sure there's any kind of perfect completion point. Perhaps this is a conversation for another day, but I guess I'm not sure, again, picking on that project, that if the scope does expand, I'm not sure that government funding will necessarily expand to cover that increased scope. So it may well be that there are other things that are identified that need to fall into our next LTP update as a capital works program that rolls on from the climate resilience projects. It's a little hard to tell at the moment. I understand exactly what you're saying, and we need to be aware of the cost and the time pressure associated with these projects. How it'll all land, it's too early to tell. It's certainly evolving, but I probably need at least another 3 to 6 months to get a clear picture about it. So particular risks, overall budget and delivery timeframe, that doesn't change. Interestingly, Southland's funding agreement has a completion timeframe that I think is 6 months, at least 6 months earlier than the ones that we're working to in the Manawatu. And I've put that to Kanoa, and that 6 months makes a big difference because it's another construction season. And I basically said, what about that? Can we not at least push our timeframes back to line up with everyone else? They're open to that, but they didn't want to have that conversation right at the present point in time. So that's still parked, but it's still a conversation I'm going to have because that time frame makes a big difference. Stead Street pump station cost estimate we talked about. complexities with Otapuni was talked about with the last governance group meeting. There are issues there. I think there is a broader discussion around that, maybe not for today, but that's one that has a range of challenges to it, just in terms of the environment, and as I say, the complexity of construction. Sourcing of key materials is a particular risk, and working on, and it's part of the reason why we put the ad in the newspaper to try and identify fuel sources that aren't on our radar. There's a cost driver to that, but it's also making sure that key players are not locking up sources of material that might compromise, well, not a competitive tender process, but we're keen to actually, have as wide a scope as possible for anyone who has a set of trucks and set of diggers to actually do work, make sure that there aren't any officials with that environment. Consenting, still working through that a little bit. Probably feeling a little bit better about that now than I was a few months ago, but still a challenge. Resourcing has been noted by Kanara. It's specifically mentioned in the last report from the advisory board. We're working on that. As of Friday, having another interview with project engineer, which is proving to be a pretty promising conversation. So we certainly are building that resourcing up at the moment. And the capacity of the sector consultants and contractors at the moment, that's certainly a challenge.
Plenty of challenges. Thanks.
Indeed.
Councillor McFarlane, a question?
I was just going to add, in regards to what came out of the meeting in Gore, was highly important to keep the community informed of what's going on, especially around trees. As the public don't like seeing trees getting cut down for no reason. So, and there's some pretty old, the walnuts grove or something that was made a point of, they got heard they were all going to get cleared out, and they're not all, but there will be some. So it's, but we've got to focus on why we're doing it. And but that was one thing the Gore District Council were just saying, keep us informed so we can tell the public what's going on too. So that's all I'd say.
Which is a challenge with this chair, because we're trying to do so much in a short space of time. That's something that has the potential to fall off the edge. There is a risk that sits there, that with the time pressures that we're under, we might not get the level of community engagement that would be ideal with these projects.
Being conscious of it is a good start. And you're clearly having good conversations with other sector individuals, so that's got to help, surely. Sounds good. Any other questions? Alan, did you have anything? Nope. This time, would somebody like to move that?
I think I did move originally. So.
Thanks, Chairman Hall, and second, Councillor McPhail. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
It's carried. Thanks very much, Raymond and Ellie. Given that it's 12 o'clock and you've had to concentrate for 2 whole hours, I'm suggesting that we have a tea break, a cup of tea break, seeing as we need to move into public excluded anyway. So we'll break for a 5-minute, grab it and bring it back in, cup of tea, and move into public excluded right this minute. Because
moving into public excluded to carry on with our papers with submarket negotiations, including commercial and industrial negotiations, to prevent the disclosure or use of official information for propagating advantage, and to protect the privacy of natural persons, including that of deceased natural persons.
thank you. Somebody like to move that, please?
I'll move that.
McKellar, seconded Bruce, I think.
Yes.
All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. We will break now for a quick cuppa. Back at 6 minutes.